My friends, welcome to this episode of the Outdoor Gear Review. I hope you all are doing well. Sometime back, I put up a preview of a product that I've begun testing out, which is known as the NatureHike IGT Table. Basically, it's a tabletop that is fully customizable. You could put in a gas-powered stove, you could put in a grill component, or you could use it as a plain and simple table. With the tabletop, each of the panels are removable. So basically, you can adapt the table for any sort of situation that you want to. In my initial preview, I showed off the table, I showed off the optional components, and with the table itself, I had a question. There's one panel that features a circular hole. Basically, you can slide back this cover, revealing the hole, and my question was, what was that for? I suspected that it was for some sort of canister gas stove, and that is exactly what it is for. And guess what, folks? That product, the stove, it just hit the market. This here, my friends, is the NatureHike 3-burner IGT stove. You can use this with the table, and you can also use it on its own. What we have here is the storage bag for the 3-burner NatureHike stove that fits inside of this hole here. Basically, it mounts to the table, so you have this flat surface, and then you have the stove, and you can do whatever it is that you want to do. With the case here, this is pretty nice, actually. This is a very thick material. It's a polyester of some sort, but it's quite robust. We have a draw pull up here at the top. On the inside here, we have a ton of O-rings that the company has given us with this stove for some reason. These O-rings, I'll show you where they go in a minute, they don't generally wear out, but for some reason, I don't know, the company has included a ton of these. I have a lighter, and that's because this stove does not have an igniter. And here we have the stove itself. With the stove, everyone, we have 3 foldable pot supports up here at the top with very aggressive jimping. We have the 3 burner heads. Amongst the burner heads, we have a preheat tube, which basically regulates the performance of this stove. It heats up, it vaporizes the gas, and you get a solid level of performance. This will help the stove perform better in cool to cold conditions, and it will also give you better performance when your gas canister is running low. On the bottom, we have 3 folding legs. Around the body here, we have these extensions that basically stick out. And it's these extensions that stop the stove from falling through this hole here. Here we have the adjuster, and this is how you mount this to the fuel canister. To put the stove inside of the hole, you need to put the fuel hose in first. And then it sits there just like this. Basically, it's sitting on those extensions on the side of the body. And that is basically what holds this into place. Let's go ahead and let's attach a gas canister and fire this up. Luckily with this hole here, it will fit just about any size isobutane canister. Nice and easy through the hole. That means that we can go ahead and attach this on the table instead of underneath the table. Okay, so again, we have the legs on the bottom. We can unfold those and set the stove up just like this, or we could drop the canister down, drop in the stove, and run it just like this. Now here's a tip for you all. If you plan to use this stove with this table in this sort of setup, make sure to get the larger size fuel canisters. This here is a 16-ounce fuel canister. With the larger size fuel canister, it will sit on the ground and it won't hang. If you get a smaller size fuel canister, it may dangle and swing back and forth. Now that you all have seen this stove, let's do a quick boil test. Let's boil 2 cups of water and let's see how fast it can do it. Once that's done, we'll go over the stats concerning the stove, and then I'll share with you all my impressions and thoughts so far. That, my friends, was a very impressive result. Less than 2 minutes to boil 2 cups of water. 1 minute, 49 seconds. This stove is fast. Really, really fast. With the boil test out of the way, it's time to go over some stats. So with this stove here, it runs on isobutane only. It features 3 burner heads, and the BTU rating for this stove is an impressive 12,000. The stove has quite a bit of heft to it, and that's because it's made from 304 stainless steel, aluminum, and brass. When it comes to the dimensions, when it's set up, it is 6.1 inches wide with the pot supports out. It stands 4.9 inches tall with the legs out and the pot supports, and down at the bottom it is 4.7 inches wide with the legs. The stove all by itself with no storage bag, when it's folded up, it is 4.5 inches wide and it is 3.5 inches tall. When it's stored, it is 5.7 inches wide and 4.7 inches tall. The fuel hose length is 16.1 inches. The weight of the stove with the storage bag and a lighter is 1.1 pounds. The stove on its own is 1 pound. As far as price goes, at the time of filming, it is $40 on Amazon. And that takes us over to my impressions of this stove so far. So far, I like it a lot, but it's not perfect, especially when it comes to mingling in with this table here. Something is off as far as the milling goes, and I don't know if it's on the stove or if it's on the table itself, namely with that cutout. But the stove and the table do not align perfectly. There's some leeway there. And that does create just a little bit of instability when it comes to like putting a pot on top of that. The stove is never going to fall through that hole, but it's never going to be extremely stable in that hole. I don't want to make this issue sound too dramatic because it's not. This is still very stable. You don't have to worry about knocking anything over. I'm just saying it could be better. NatureHike really does need to pay more attention to the smaller details when it comes to the manufacturing of these products. Make sure that the hole is completely circular, and they need to make sure that the stove has the same dimensions on each side so it fits perfectly in that hole and it doesn't wobble. As it stands right now with this stove, with this table, my versions, it does wobble somewhat. That's a con. Another con is that this stove has no built-in igniter, and there's really no reason why that's the case. Especially with the burner heads being so close together, all you have to do is spark up one and all 3 light up. Oftentimes when it comes to stoves that have 3 burner heads, the burner heads are far apart, and that's why you wouldn't have a built-in igniter. That's with some stoves, but with this stove here, there really is no reason why that feature isn't included. Another con that I have for this stove is the fact that there's no windscreen built into the stove itself. This is rather minor, but in breezy situations, you would get better performance if there was a windscreen present. An additional con that I have for this stove here is the fact that the construction could be just a little bit better. If you pay close attention to this stove, it has some damage present. Damage that I didn't do. It came that way directly from the company, basically directly from the manufacturer. You will see here on one of the burner heads, there's been some damage there. It's superficial, but it doesn't look good. Additionally, the top pot supports, they do not align for some reason. To me, it feels like one of the legs was bent out of place during the manufacturing process, and because of that damage, the legs do not align, as you can see here. Luckily, with all of these cons, they do not impact the overall performance of this stove. So those are the cons that I have. Let's switch over to the pros because I have plenty of those. First off, when it comes to the overall construction of this stove, it's really nice. They use premium materials. It has a good weight to it without it being super heavy. It feels like a premium stove. The quality could be a little bit better as far as the fit and finish goes, but overall, this is a nice stove, folks. At the same time, it has a very compact size, and that's quite surprising. Generally speaking, when it comes to stoves that feature 3 burner heads, they're quite large, but with this stove here, it's quite small. When you have the stove sitting on top of a table or on the ground, the 3 legs do a good job of making it stable. The next pro that I have for this stove is value. For $40, you're getting quite a bit with this stove system. It's multifunctional. You can use it with the table or on its own. It's made from premium materials, even though the build construction could be a little bit better. Then you have to think about the overall performance of this stove, and that for $40 is very impressive. 12,000 BTUs with this stove for a stove that's $40. Made from these materials, without a doubt, there's a good value here. Another pro for this stove is the fact that it has a preheat tube. That is going to benefit you in many ways, as I discussed already. I've already mentioned how substantial the storage bag is, and for the money, it is quite impressive. Oftentimes, for this type of money, you get really storage bags, but that's not the case here. The last pro that I have for this stove are the pot supports. They do a good job of supporting your pot, cup, pan, and the thing is this stove can support any size pot, cup, or pan. Even the small 1 cup size cups will fit on this stove. If you want to use something like that, all you have to do is fold the legs in, and your cup will be completely stable on the stove. So with that being said, everyone, that pretty much wraps up my preview of the 3-burner NatureHike stove that works on its own and with the IGT table. All in all, I'm very impressed with this stove. NatureHike You do need to work just a little bit on your quality there. The issues with the legs being out of alignment, the damage being done to the burner head, all of that comes directly from the manufacturer that way. That wasn't damaged in shipping or anything like that. Check on the quality there, make sure that your products look good before sending them out. Also, make sure everything is in alignment as far as the milling goes when it comes to the tabletop and the stove itself, because it does need to fit securely and stably inside of that hole. As it stands now, with my stove, my table, it is just a little bit wobbly. Those are the real cons that I have with this stove, but luckily, the pros outweigh those cons big time. The overall performance of this stove is top notch. It is very impressive, it really is. At the same time, this stove is inexpensive, not super heavy, but yet feels premium. It does have a good weight to it, which I do like. It doesn't feel rinky-dink or anything like that. When it comes to the adjuster, it does a good job. It's not too stiff, it's not too loose, it's just right. Now, my friends, let's talk about all of these O-rings that the company sent. So, these were inside of the instruction manual for this stove. And the only reason I even saw these was because I was basically just going through the instructions real quick. I was about to trash them. So I took the instructions out of a plastic bag and it threw little O-rings all over the place. I found this many, and I count 6 here, but who knows how many fell in the trash. There could have been 10, 12, 15, who knows? The question is, why did the company include so many of these O-rings? It's a really good question, and honestly, I do not know. A single one of those O-rings go on the inside of this lindle valve here, basically to stop leaking. I've never had to replace an O-ring on any stove I've ever owned, but yet NatureHike has sent us 6 of these, maybe even more. Do they know something that we don't? I mean, for some reason with this stove, do they wear out very quickly? I don't know. So far, this stove is looking really good, folks. I'm going to continue testing this out, and in the future, I will put up my review. So stay tuned. Now it's your turn to sound off. Comment down below, share your thoughts. What do you all think about this stove? What do you all think about the way that it connects with the IGT table? Do you like that? It's interesting, that's for sure. But for myself, I have no issue just putting the stove on top of the table and running it that way. For myself, more testing needs to be done to see which way I like it better. Yeah, who knows? Comment down below, share your thoughts, everyone. Before you go, hit the thumbs up. It helps the channel quite a bit. Everyone, take care, strength and honor. Bye for now.